Alright, just thinking the other day about the ridiculousness of this situation here involving firewood. I had a great drive looking for a firewood area. You guys would have loved to see it on video, and all I had was a crappy little camera where you can barely see a damn thing, but I was blasting through giant mud puddles and the whole lot. Because of that 35mm rain, somehow all these puddles are still holding water up there. Was good, would have made for some good footage. Anyway, now you see the forest here, never mind that, but all out, though it's not good to see with this camera, there is forest to the horizon. That's my laundry back there. That's a little bunch of trees out in the point. Standing right here, I can see forest to the horizon. When I went through looking for that firewood area the other day, more scrap metal, there were dead trees everywhere. I mean, frickin' everywhere. Technically speaking, as a born and bred citizen in this country, I assume that if it's government land that I sort of kind of own a minuscule percentage of it along with every other citizen. It seems so bloody ridiculous to me that they're sitting on mountains and mountains of firewood, collapsed trees all over the bloody place, and we're not allowed to touch any of it, and they let the whole lot rot. And then the next bushfire that comes through and kills a whole bunch of koalas and shit in the process and burns people's houses down, which they had one not too far from here a little while ago that screwed people up pretty badly. I never even heard about it. I heard there was fires in the area, but then I've seen photos of it since. And, you know, all that collapsed firewood burns during a bushfire, and nobody makes any use of it all. And so you've got masses and masses of this wood that burns, and meanwhile the whole lot of these people who are connected to the grid around here are using electrical heating from burning coal on the other side of the state. Coal reserves that could have been left in the ground and used centuries later. They would have lasted for centuries, whereas this wood laying out on the ground might have only lasted for another 10 years out in the weather. But no, we'll let that burn with the next bushfire, and because we're the government and we're decided what we want to do, we're decided that nobody else is going to make use of this stuff. We're sitting on mountains of it, and just because we can, you're not allowed to use it. And we know we're going to lose it all in the next bushfire, but we make the rules around here, so we're sitting on a ton of this shit and nobody is allowed to use it just because we said, and we're doing that just because we can. And meanwhile we're drawing off the bloody coal reserves, which put sulfur dioxide into the air, and if done in too big of quantities that leads to acid rain, as they found out in Siberia and East Germany. And meanwhile, all this stuff going to waste just because the government says you're not taking it, just because they can. I'm not into socialism, and they've got mountains of this stuff that they're not letting anybody use. And I'm not saying that we necessarily have a right to other people's private property, but this is public property that we technically own as citizens already amongst each other. So it's not like we're stealing this off somebody's private stash. It's a publicly owned stash. And the fact is, the whole lot is going to be lost anyway in the next bushfire and just go to waste. But never mind that. In the meantime, keep digging up the coal that we could have left in the ground. Keep pouring sulfur dioxide and smoke into the air down near those power stations. And keep paying for the bloody ability to heat your house. I mean, The only one that could come up with something that fucking stupid would be the government. You know. I understand with fishing that it may need, you know, to regenerate fish. You know, you need more fish breeding, and that's why there's so few whales. They stripped them out so quick in the 1800s that, you know, there's not enough whales now. But we're talking about dead wood. It's not alive. There's no shortage of trees. Dead wood that's just rotting into the fucking ground to be used by nobody. There's one friggin' bird that nests in dead trees. There's jack shit where the fuck all of this bird in another town, and they get a little bit fussy about that there. But it'll only nest in hollows in standing trees, not ones that actually hit the ground, because then the foxes will eat it. So, you know. But let's stop you from getting ones laying on the ground anyway. But, it's just stupid. Anyway, it's my little whinge and bitch for the moment. If you ever wondered how that thingo's going, the exhaust fan, of course it goes pretty well as you've seen, but it actually is making quite a difference to the temperature of the room. I think it's really, like, it's doing a damn good job for keeping the building cool just by having that thing there humming away. Fires up about 10:30, 11 o'clock every day, and yeah, it continues on to about 6 o'clock at night usually. It definitely helps things. Anyway, in a second I've got to pull out the sacrificial anode on this, and it's basically buggered. One thing I know about using propane in vehicles is it's slightly corrosive, and I was told by, I don't know if it was an installer of LPG systems or my mechanic, one of my mechanics, that basically speaking, when you run a vehicle on petrol, you know, gasoline, creates a little bit of soot and it will block any holes in the exhaust. If you convert that vehicle to LPG and run on LPG all the time, if there's any holes or about to be holes, it will open them right up by eating into it because it's slightly acidic. Now, when you get engine oil, I might as well show you the bloody engine oil because I've got some sitting on the front veranda. They actually have additives in it. Originally, you used to, you know, not get anything, and then, like, get nothing special. I think this one's empty anyway. So gas, that means propane, basically. We just refer to it as gas. And blah, blah, blah. Turbocharged petrol, LPG, dual fuel engines. You can't really see that much. But they've got additives in these ones, and there's normal ones for petrol, and then you got the one that is for modern LPG and dual fuel engines, that's got additives in it to stop it corroding the engine because it's slightly acidic. But it'll still get the blooming exhaust, and they have a bit of a tendency to eat out exhaust faster. Usually, originally, you just used to use normal oil, and then the taxi companies used to be able to buy in this oil that had those additives, and now everybody gets it everywhere. And yeah, basically, those additives will stop your engine turning to shit, but still, I had my exhaust replaced 4 or 5 years ago, and I think the bastard's got a hole in it again already. So I might, because I can weld sheet metal with a MIG welder, I might go and weld a bit of sheet metal over it with a MIG welder. When I pull the battery terminals off on my car, it's not too bad because it's actually, what's his name? Only stuffs up these settings on the radio, and that's it. And you've got to type in a radio code, which I've got, which the previous owner wrote in the manual, then you're back on the road. So it's easy enough to be able to weld on that thing by taking the battery terminals off. So I might have to fix the exhaust at some point if I could be stuffed.
Yeah, what I'm saying about the acidic nature is I think it also has an effect on the old car propane tanks, because this thing here, sacrificial anode, this has barely faced any use. I've had to scoop out all this white scum off the surface. Now I've got white scum built up all around the, what's his name, or the pipes inside. Here where it overflowed a few times, bit around there, and it's basically eaten out this magnesium sacrificial anode. I've got a feeling when you do this, when you go and use these propane tanks out of cars for other purposes, they have a bit of a high acidic level, especially with water. I mean, the little half of another one here we've got, you know, that's rust a little bit, but no more than you'd expect it to, and the outside's actually quite alright sort of thing. Considering the fact I stripped all the paint off and only gave it a reasonably thin layer of potbelly black. Not too bad, and it may be that the smoke is, you know, all right with it, but the water as such isn't. But yeah, I'm going to. They have magnesium ones. They also these days have aluminium ones, which are a darn sight cheaper than magnesium. I have aluminium, not anodized stuff, but well, it's actually the fuel gauges out of these. They're actually got a float, and they're all aluminium. So I'm going to try and solder to this and onto one of these fuel gauges, aluminium fuel gauge, throw it in there, hope it'll eat away the bloody float valve that's made out of aluminium, and use that as a sacrificial anode. I've got a few of them actually, because I have. Anyway, yeah, so I'm going to pull this out and I'll show you how badly eaten away it is. A feeding frenzy. They look like they're friggin' eating her alive. And there's still one more wandering around somewhere. It's not here. Being eaten by kitties. Shit, they're getting big. She's got a great tactic. What she does, it takes a while to get a front leg lifted up to give him the best access, but what she does, first she'll lick their ass and then she'll lick the rest of them. Instead of licking the rest of them first and then licking their ass. And then I'll turn around and pick one of them up, which is not as clean as it could be. Someone's going crazy. Anyway, I've been trying to get the sacrificial anode out and not having much luck at all. I might clip off the bit that's left underwater that's basically probably just going to drop off and fall to the bottom. If I can clip that off with pliers or something, then I might be alright. It seems I found an offcut of it, because the one I got was one that just had a standardised fitting, which I could easily fit to, you know, an internally threaded bit of 3/4 inch pipe, and I said, you know, is there any ones that don't have a fancy thread that I could just get another fitting? Oh yeah, there's this one here, fits to a 3/4 inch internal connector, and yeah, but it was too long, so I gave it a bit of a snip off, and I've found that offcut. Seems as though there's an internal wire that runs through the rest of the magnesium, which I can see on it, and it seems as though that wire is the only thing left inside the tank side from just a little bit at the top. So I might just get in there and try and cut the wire off, because I don't think I'm going to get the damn thing out. I've been great big blooming damn near foot-long spanner on it that I've been hitting with a friggin' hammer, and all I'm doing is just rounding the damn thing off. So anyway, sprayed a bit of oil in there, and we'll see, silicone lubricant actually, and we'll see how we go. But in the meantime, I've been removing all the rubbish, leftover bits of frame off the cardboard house floor there. I've chocked all the bottom of it up. Those of you who remember a super dish that I started making that sort of got over here pretty rough episode getting it over here, and then it ended up collapsing from wind. There was some that was rotten, and I never realised the wood was rotten until it was all too obvious when it collapsed. And so I've been going through that, scrounging out the good parts and leaving the rotten parts there to be able to make up the frame for that. It's probably not going to be very tall at all. I'm looking at about 2 metres at the back, 180 centimetres at the front. Not really tall enough to stand up in, but I sort of thought, do you want a massive space that you got to heat that's only that massive just because you've got to stand up for 5 minutes to go in there, or can you just sort of duck down for 5 minutes while you water everything? And I thought, now I can duck down while I water everything for 5 minutes. And yeah, so anyway, that's what I'm sort of planning to do, is make it reasonably short. I may make it even shorter, but I don't want to get too short, otherwise it's just ridiculous. Otherwise I'll be crawling. Yeah, it's funny during winter when you deal with wood and stuff like that, you can't seem to see the rotten stuff terribly easy because it's overcast and everything's wet and everything's sort of dark and the same damn colour. It's also exceedingly hard to tell the difference between treated pine and untreated, because that slight green tinge that it has, you can't even see it here properly on overcast days. It's really just too hard to pick the difference, especially if the wood's wet, you know. And summer comes and you can see everything and work everything out, and you know, you can get on with stuff outside. And during winter, God blimey, you know, if it's not cold and wet, it's also flaming that overcast that you can't get a real clear look at some things, you know, without shining a bloody big torch at them. You know, I couldn't believe it, seeing a certain person in New York who had some pretty dark days, and you know, yet there were times here where, in recent years, working at Boomerang Nurseries, it's the middle of the day, they had to have friggin' spotlights on inside a frickin' glass house to be able to see things properly because it was so bloody overcast. They're having trouble reading the tags on the plants. I mean, yeah, it's very dark here during winter, comparative to summer, but nowhere near as dark as probably Moscow and places like that are horrendous. Sun only comes out 4 hours a day and shit like this, I've been told. So I don't think this son of a bitch is coming out. Try and see if I can get you a look at all of this. Flipping silicon glistening down the side of it. Try not to drop my camera in. I don't know if you can see the corrosion there or whatnot. But that tapers off to basically a wire, and as you can probably see, I've been round off the friggin' edges trying to get it off. It doesn't even want to come off. Yeah, a bit pissed with myself because I haven't quite got as much done so far today as I'd like to. There's still plenty of daylight left, but I have got a few things I've got to go and get the what's his name, plaster in a second from my father's, and got a little bit of wood there that I got sorted out and whatnot. Yeah, I'll still try and muck around with this sacrificial anode. I should be able to do something on that even if I work at that later on. Don't want to bite off too many things all at once. The next couple of days I've got to get rid of the veranda too, where I've got to replace the bits of gable. I've been looking at what I've got in insulation panels, and my father's going, oh, you know, I might keep those to make a cool room. Oh, God blimey. He was worried about an extra freezer running and the power that lousy extra freezer would take. One that we got from my grandparents that they told me they threw out, and I've since seen up in my sister's shed. so I don't know what their version of throw out really meant. Give it to my sister. It's a shitbox thing, but he's worried about running that as an extra, and then he's talking about, oh, but I might build a cool room. Cool rooms run off three-phase power. They take massive power levels, and he doesn't have three-phase power connected. And I had a good look at the panels, and what I got there is jack shit left. I'll be able to get about a metre around the sides of all this, and that'll be it. We'll just about be run out. So I don't know how a metre tall around the sides of this would be enough to build you a cool room any bigger than a friggin' dog kennel, basically. So, and like a double-length dog kennel. So yeah, I'm sussing out this stuff. I've put it on the roof of the backup shower too. But the trouble is there's two different thicknesses of it. So where I then stick my framing has to be back a bit, and then the damn framing's only sticking into half-inch bloody floor planks. So yeah, mightn't be so good, but I want to try and get this stuff and basically sit it right on the edge. But as I said, you know, there's one that's about that thick and another one that's about that thick. And, you know, a lot of them, 80, 90, 120, 110 centimetres tall when I'm looking for 100 centimetres at least. And, you know, there's one that's only 60 centimetres tall. You know, it's only 2 foot tall. It's not going to really insulate that well. But I want just at least a metre of insulation. And then the top of it, like the remaining, you know, metre or so, to be either clear plastic or glass. And it's probably going to be glass because I've got a lot of glass. But in all this, I've got to sort of then work out what's going where and step back the framing to compensate for the thickness of it if I'm going to have it line level with that. And so then I can't really just go whack a frame up because then the bloody panels won't fit. I don't want them hanging directly off the framing. I want them more or less sitting on the floor because they'll, you know, put a lot less stress on everything. But and I'm going to be battling to fit one in the back here. It may have to overhang a little bit more, maybe overhanging the back rail a little bit. But either side, I think I've got plenty of room for them. You know, as I said, I'm just going to have to, you know, probably pick the thicker ones for the front and the thinner ones for the back or whatever if I have trouble getting past this or past this. So, yeah. Anyway, I've got to go see what's going on with this plasterboard and get that home, and then I've got all the leftover cardboard from the cardboard house I'm going to give to him, because it's always good to have that sort of stuff when you're working on vehicles and even, you know, slaughtering sheep, to keep the mess out by putting a great heap of cardboard down and stuff like that. And it's bogging up half my shit in here because there's a fair few sheets, but not heaps. But it's you know, it's an inch and 3/8, inch and 5/8 thick, so it's pretty thick stuff. And I want to give him all that. And I got a few ones from solar panels and washing machines that I'll keep myself if I need any covering of any kind, but I don't really need the 40mm thick stuff. So, yeah. And as I get that trailer over here, I'm going to get those insulation panels and bring them up here as well, or the majority of them anyway, because they're not so light, and I don't really feel like carrying them with an intermittent wind blowing on and off. And then I'll sort of put them in place and then start measuring and work out what we're going to go at with this framing. Really can't bite. Anyway, I got the plaster in. It turns out all my measurements were up shit creek in a barbed wire canoe, and the plaster's a bloody perfect size it needs to be anyway. Now I'll stuff that up. So that's great, because I'm only going to have to trim about 3/8 of an inch off one end, and the whole lot is just going to sit in place perfectly. And then I've got a second sheet, so it means I've got a bit more than I thought I would have. Anyway, got that. I've got my panel sitting near the cardboard house frame, and I'm taking the last of the cardboard back. I'll push the spare wheel off the back of the trailer and roll right down the side of the hill. Couldn't believe it. Threw a rock at it to stop it rolling. Missed, and it just kept going. I've never seen a wheel
keep going and keep going and keep going. Not fall on the side. Rocks, shit everywhere. And just keep going.